sallow skin, he did not seem to invite conversation or curiosity. Rather, he repelled both. "There's your man," said Jeremy, showing him Cyprian in Gory's scented bed. "Cure him if you can." MacBaron did not ask, "Who is he?" but, "Is he hurt?" "No. Sick. Old. That's all," answered Jeremy. "My fee will be 50 rupees per visit," MacBaron announced, as if saying his prayers. Jeremy produced the money. MacBaron folded it, and spoke again, "Leave me alone with him, please." Whereat Jeremy demurred, but was overruled by the others, who conceded, under the inspiration of Chulander Ghost, that it was reasonable. A man without the right to practice has excuse for dispensing with witnesses. MacBaron emerged from the bedroom about 15 minutes later and announced, like a verger opening pews, that in his opinion the patient would recover. "He must lie still. Here is a prescription. Let him drink it as often as he will. You may pay me now for a second visit, that is wiser." So they paid him, and he was on his way to the waiting cab when King detained him. "Not so swiftly. We've another job. Do you mind walking?" MacBaron minded nothing if he was paid. King held him through narrow streets to a place where 3 alleys came together on the right-hand side and a high wall on the left with a narrow door in it concealed the lower story of a minaret whose mosque had long since succumbed to the ravages of time. The door opened when King struck 3 blows on it, and Ali's dark face appeared in a challenging scrutiny. "He groans much but says nothing at all," Ali announced abruptly, and turned his back to lead them in. The minaret was Ali's good provision. WAKF, the system of Muslim endowments for charitable purposes, is as liable to abuse as any other human scheme for standing off the evil day. Ali's blood brother, having lent his sword in a blood feud to which a wealthy merchant in the Chandni Chowk was party, was now in receipt of a comfortable income and the job of muezzin to a minaret without a mosque. In theory he was supposed to cry the summons to prayer at the appointed times, but in practice he was neither seen nor heard, lest busybodies should inquire into the source of his revenue. Naturally, no man with a sinecure like that would be willing to share it for nothing. He demanded hotel prices, and was indignant when Ali withheld 10%. As his own commission. But the virtue of him was that he was just as much bent on secrecy as anyone, and the watch he kept in consequence was priceless. Even after Ali had admitted King and MacBaron within the wall, Ali's brother examined them and grumbled at having to entertain half Delhi. "Is this a salivation or Maykhana?" he demanded. King held MacBaron by the winding inner stair to a room at the top of the minaret where the muezzin was supposed to sleep, and whence the now decrepit gallery was reached by a narrow door in the masonry. The door was closed, and such light as was available came through a 6-inch slit in the wall, for Ali's brother would permit no artificial light for fear of attracting attention. On a truck bed in the darkest part of the round room lay the sole survivor of the 3 who had burnt Cyprian's books. The whites of his eyes gleamed in darkness, but the rest of him was nearly invisible, for they had taken his yellow robe away, and his coppery, dry skin was of a shade that nearly matched the gloom. It was too hot to endure blankets. MacBaron glanced at him, and then at King without visible emotion. "My fee will be 1,000 rupees, he announced. "Check due." "Cash." King was obliged to return and obtain the money from Grim. That took time, because Grim had to send a messenger to cash his check. When King reached the minaret again, the prisoner's leg was already in plaster of Paris brought by Ali from Agon's apothecaries, and the wrist was being manipulated in spite of the Hindu's protests. They had tied him to the bed. There was no other way of controlling him. The only thing he had not done to make trouble for them was to cry aloud. "That arm must come off," announced MacBaron 5 minutes after King's return. "The reason is this." He went into details, deeply technical, displaying the same fearlessness in diagnosis that an engineer does when ordering parts of a locomotive scrapped. His objection to witnesses had vanished, for it was obvious that none of this secretive batch of clients would dare to expose him, and he had sufficient sense for situations not to ask the prisoner's permission. The whole conversation was in English until he bent over the bed at last and, looking straight into the victim's eyes, said curtly in Punjabi, "Your arm must come off at the elbow." That produced speech at last, coppery, resonant argument all mixed with threats intended to convey one point of principle: anything went, they might burn him living, he would not resist. But he would enter whole into the next world, with his right wrist fit for Kali's service. If they sought to take his arm off, he would work a vengeance on them. If they did not believe that, let them take the first step. "Hocus pocus," said MacBaron, not particularly sotto voce. "Is the leg all right?" King asked him. "It is set. It will heal. He will limp." "Good enough. Please come again this evening," said King. "To cut the arm off." "Very well. That is 2 visits in 24 hours. 200 rupees extra, in advance. King paid him, and he went. By Allah, we of Sikandaram, who think we will plunder India when the British go, must first take lessons from that man, remarked Ali. Go below and keep watch, ordered King, and in a minute he and the prisoner were alone together, looking in each other's eyes. Want to lose your arm? The man grinned in agony. The grin was half grimace, but there was defiance and even amusement there. The arm that knows the trick of the handkerchief, the killing arm. King put as much cruelty and mockery as he could summon into his voice. But the trouble was that King knew well how far in the worst extremity he would be willing to go. And what was strength of character, too manly to take full advantage of helplessness even for any reward, the other could read but could not understand. He misinterpreted it as weakness, fear, whereas about the only fear King has, and that in spoken secret sacred in his inner being, is that he may not in some crisis quit himself as if all the decent fellows in the world were looking on. Will you amputate? Asked the Hindu, pointing to the injured wrist with his other hand and grinning again. He had feared Macbaran. He was no more afraid of King than a priest is of policeman. The worst of it was King knew well that, whatever power this fellow might have of summoning assistance without the use of obvious means, he would not use it except in dire necessity. There is no rule more strict than that, probably because the penalty for breach of it is unimaginably awful. Radio is a joke, a mere clumsy subterfuge compared to the gift some Indians have of communicating with one another across great distances. Every man who has the least acquaintance with the East knows that. But they don't give up their secret even in extremity, or use it without unquestionable reason. It was possible that he might tell secrets under the torture and fear of amputation. But King was not morally capable of doing that. Instead he tried bribery, a bargain he would have said. Keep your arm and join us. You may have one full share in any discovery we make. The man laughed genuinely, just as copper-voiced as he was copper-skinned. It was as if some devil in an unseen world had reached over and struck a gong in this one, 3 rising notes and then the overtones, all mockery. King laughed too, on a descending scale. He appreciated what few from the Western Hemisphere can realize, that money, a material reward, or any of the compensations that the West deems valuable have no weight whatever in the calculations of the thinking East. The politicians and a few of the bunya class have swapped old lamps for new, but at the very mention of Western money or wisdom the old East laughs. She can afford to. All right, King said. Where are we then? He turned his face away deliberately, as if discouraged. If I can't overcome you, what do you propose to do with me? He gave the man time to consider that, then met his eyes again, objective thinking Anglo-Saxon challenging the East that thinks subjectively or not at all. Neither could pierce the other's veil. You are no use, said the Hindu, letting his head fall back on the folded blanket that served for pillow. His eyes were alight with fever. In spite of the intolerable heat, King made sure that the door leading out to the gallery was locked, for whoever dares set limits to the capacity of esoteric India is likely to find himself surprised. Then he left him, giving orders below to keep on the qui-vive and not to give the prisoner water or information. He would let the man torture himself a while and lift his veil in his own way. And presently at Gauri's house, superintended and giggled over by Gauri and her maid, King, Grim and Jeremy put on the 3 orange-yellow smocks that had been the garb of the enemy, coppering their skins with some compound of vegetable greases that Gauri procured for them, and changing every expression of their faces until Gauri and the rest pronounced them perfect strangers. Then Grim and Jeremy submitted to King's drill, which was exasperating in insistence on minutest details, Gauri prompting him. Do you think you could manipulate a handkerchief the way you saw it done? King asked, tossing one of Gauri's long silk scarves to Jeremy. He imitated perfectly the swift, apparently effortless pass from hand to hand. There is nothing that Jeremy can't imitate. Nothing was lacking except the will to kill by strangling the victim, and the secret of how it is done. Can't hatch a chicken from a glass egg, he said apologetically. I'm safe until I thug somebody. King was insatiable, drilling, making them repeat all manner of proposed behavior in emergency, until they struck at last from very weariness, and Gauri brought cooling drinks and comfort in the shape of flattery. Perfect, she told them. Nevertheless, this deferential Babu, like wholesale tiger-smelling traps invariably, would better accompany this expedition, said Chulinder Ghose. Obesity is only disadvantage, curiosity impelling, adipose impeding, striking happy medium at all times. You be still, commanded King. Certainly, Sahib, I desist. I'm silent. Sublime satisfaction in service of nobleman makes obedient Babu dumb. Your humble servant, Mum's the word, like Yankee skirmisher in no man's land. Nevertheless. He paused, looking up under lowered eyelids like a meek, ridiculous, fat schoolgirl. Grim recognized the reference to a Yankee skirmisher as an appeal to himself. Spill it, he ordered. Be quick. Silence being self-imposed on all three sahibs, somebody should come along to scintillate with clever verbiage. Self being otherwise unoccupied, whatever you said would give the game away, Grim interrupted severely. Even secret hymn to Goddess Kali. He intoned it, throwing out his chest and making a pig's snout of his fat lips around the lower bass notes that rumble and roll like the voice of the underworld, glorifying in destruction, making of cruelty, death and disease sweet satisfaction for the dreadful bride of Shiva. Few ever heard that hymn who were not initiates of Kali's dreadful cult, or were you ever held for the sacrifice? King asked him suddenly. Sahib, I am superstitious. Reference to secret details of risky past might cause repetition of same, which decency forbid. Dumb. He would not tell how he had learned that hymn. He knew the value of it, and of silence. He was indispensable. No extra charge, he announced with pursed lips. One break and you're fired, said Grim. One break and we are all dead, he retorted. Awful, yet at my age nevertheless how many last chances I have had. Cat O' 9 Tails is rank outsider compared to most of us. Whoever boasted of dying daily had me in mind. Verb, sap. They waited until long after dark, when Ramsden reported the safe disposal of 2 corpses, and was detailed to take care of Cyprian. Tell him he's in the house of an Indian gentleman, whose wife can't very well interview him in her husband's absence, Grim advised. Say his own place was full of gas, so we had to lock it up. If he asks any more questions, tell him the doctor says he must sleep. Narayan Singh was told off to await the doctor. Then the 3, Chulinder Ghose following, set forth on what was actually a forlorn hope. Pray, you men, said King, half laughing. If we can't get an inside track to the 9 through this man, we may as well admit defeat. He's dry, full of fever and pain, half conscious. We can fool him now or never. They could almost fool themselves. Their shadows on the street wall so resembled the parts they played that they had the sensation of being followed by assassins, the heavy footsteps of Chulinder assisting the suggestion. They totally fooled Ali of Sikandaram and his suspicious brother. Ali thrust his long knife through the partly opened door in the wall and threatened to disembowel the lot of them unless they made themselves scarce. By Allah, shall a Hindu set foot on the sacred threshold of a mosque? He demanded, as the rightful keeper of the place shifted a lantern this way and that behind him to expose the intruders better. The voice of Chulinder Ghose was revelation, impiously making use of holy writ from the shadows in the rear. And they came unto their own, but their own received them not. Even in A.D. 70 they knew the nature of Sikandaram. Give sop to Cerberus, Sahibs. Price of admission is payable in beehive brandy. I knew it all along, said Ali with a curt laugh. Any fool would know it, his brother agreed. Open the door then, fools. Chulinder Ghose waddled in first, pushing aside the 2 custodians, bowing in his 3 employers, retiring again behind them to hold up both hands like the leader of an orchestra directing pianissimo. Thereafter not a word was said. In creaking, bat-winged darkness they foremounted the minaret stairs, pausing each half-dozen steps to listen for sounds from above. Chulinder Ghose, holding a flask of water destined for the prisoner's use when he should acquire the right to it by bargain, stopped on the rickety floor below the upper room and sat cross-legged, with his face toward the opening through which the other 3 must pass a square hole at the stairhead. Low sounds human speech assuredly emerged through it, using some other than the ordinary language of the streets. The words ceased as King in the lead reached midway up the last flight of stairs. A face appeared in the opening coppery, even in that dim gloom a new face, not the prisoner's. King, never hesitating, took the next step and the others followed. A word would have betrayed them. But even the Babu, he particularly, rose to the heights of instant self-command. A stanza of the hymn to Kali rose from the Babu's throat like a burst of faraway organ music, and the face in the opening withdrew. King went on up. He had not hesitated. He was not lost. Keeping step, not hurrying, not looking to the right or left but purposely moving like men in a dream, the other 2 followed him through and sat down alongside him in the attitude the 3 book-burners had taken on Cyprian's yak hair carpet, Jeremy at one end. The owner of the unexpected face thrust his hand against the door that led to the gallery, letting in sufficient starlight to reveal the orange-yellow of his long smock. Then he sat down facing them, with his back to the wall by the head of the bed. He said something, using a language that is dead extinct, that never did exist according to some authorities. Instead of attempting to answer, all three bowed low from the waist with their hands palms outward, like temple images come to life. And again Chulander Ghos's gorgeous baritone burst forth in praise of death. There is this about ancient mysteries. 9/10 of them, if not more, are forgotten, and the words a generation passes to the next one, mouth to ear, and the word at low breath, if not a substitute, are no more than a fragment of lost knowledge. He who had spoken in perhaps the mother tongue of lost Atlantis was content to carry on in Punjabi. Ye heard his call, too. Brothers, ye were awake. I came up the outside and broke the lock with a chisel. Ye were cleverer. Ye did not slay, for I hear the voices of the guards downstairs. Ye did well. Are there orders? Ye are not of my nine, for ye make no answer to the signal. Speech was impossible. Their one chance was to pretend to a vow of silence, such as Fakirs often take. Instead of speaking, Jeremy flicked the handkerchief from one hand to the other with the diabolical, suggestive swiftness of a past practitioner of thuggee. The man by the head of the bed betrayed astonishment, maybe disgust. By whose order should he die? He demanded. I have tested him according to rule. He has not betrayed. His failure is not complete. They two of them are dead, burned all the books because they could take none. This one sent a silent call to give us information. He deserves life. He paused for an answer. And the first sign having succeeded, Jeremy repeated it as an executioner whose patience was exhaustible. Promptly, as if they had rehearsed that very combination, Chulander Ghos sang of the death that is Kali's life, and his voice boomed through the opening in praise of pain that is Kali's ease and of want that is her affluence. That tide in the affairs of men that Shakespeare sang was surely at flood that night. It brimmed the dike. He by the head of the bed was aware of it restlessly. The nines are no longer interlocked as formerly, he grumbled. One nine has an order that another counteracts. There is confusion. There is too much slaying to hide clumsiness. Our plan was patterned on the true plan of the nine unknown, but we are a bad smell compared to their breath of roses. They know, and are unknown. We do not know, and too many know of us. A thrill that commenced with King and passed through Grim reached Jeremy, but none of them confessed to it. They sat still, expressionless, three bronze faces staring straight forward, only Jeremy's fingers moving in the overture to death. The long silk handkerchief flicked back and forth like a thread in the loom of the fates. The man on the bed groaned dismally, and as if that were a signal for the bursting of the dike that stood between ignorance and understanding, for there always is a dike between the two, and always a weak point where the dike will yield if men can only find it, he by the head of the bed called up from his inner man the lees of long ago forgotten manliness. Then, not in anger, but calmly as became a follower of the destroyer's wife, he cast his ultimatum at the three. I, who shall be slain for saying this, yet say this. Listen, ye. Thumb be the spirit in you as the lips your vow has sealed. This man, whom ye have come to kill because he failed, lest failure be a cause of danger to worse devils than ourselves, is my friend. He paused, appearing to expect some sign of astonishment. Friendship is treason to Kali. Comment was due, and Chulander Ghos obliged, hymning new stanzas in praise of her who annihilates. This man once spared me. I spare him. Ye shall not sacrifice him. Hear me. I came, not knowing who he was. Ye came, knowing. Your orders are to kill him. Mine are to go to Benares and slay one said to be a true initiate of the nine. But I am weary of all this. Ye shall not slay, I will not unless. He paused again, making no motion with his hands. But he left no doubt there was a weapon within reach with which the argument might be continued if convenient to all concerned. Jeremy's hands moved, but only to manipulate the handkerchief. He, Grim and King all had pistols, so no need for hurry. King broke silence, sparing words like one who mistrusts speech. We three have grown so weary of it all that a watch was set on us, lest we fail. Confirming that, Chulander Ghos's baritone hymned one more stanza to the Queen of Death. The man on the bed groaned wearily. In the street the sound of revelry, the last verse of a drunkard's love song announced and disguised the news that Narayan Singh arrived on the scene with the doctor. If there is only one who watches you, is there any reason why we four should fear him? Asked the man by the head of the bed. That sounded like a trap. In dealing with the secret brotherhoods it is safe to suspect that every other question is asked for precaution's sake. The wrong answer would be an astringent drying up confidence at the source. So be one died, said King, not daring yet to speak openly, because he did not know the key phrases that identify man to man. The other nodded. I am not an executioner, he said. Let your brother use his skill. And he nodded suggestively at Jeremy. The man on the bed groaned again. Chulander Ghos was absolutely still. From below came Narayan Singh's carousal song and the voices of Ali and his brother commanding silence in the name of decency. It began to be clear to King that his suspicion was accurate, that the members of one nine did not know the members of any other nine and had no means of challenging. Each nine reported to its chief, who in turn was one of nine. That was what Da Gama said, and though the Portuguese was not to be believed without deliberation, even deliberation must have limits. King took the chance. I have no means of testing you, he said. You do not respond to my signs. Nor you to mine, brother. Let us then give pledges satisfactory to each. If we let this fellow live, King answered, and paused, observing that the man by the head of the bed pricked his ears. He remembered that as Kali's follower he must not offer to deprive the goddess altogether of her prey. There must be a substitute. Will you betray the initiate of the nine to us in Benares in order that we may not fail to make her a sacrifice? No, came the answer, abrupt and firm. Substitute him who sings to her below there. It was time for heroic measures. Insofar as reason applies to murder, he was reasonable. And besides, King was aware of a sound in the outer darkness that Chulandar Ghose heard too, for the Babu sang to drown it. I believe you are an impostor. I believe you know nothing of Benares. I believe you are that faithless member of another nine whom we were told to watch for. If there should be a substitute, I think that thou. King pointed an accusing finger at him. Jeremy made the handkerchief perform like a living thing. It even looked hungry. Nay, nay, said the other. Show me proofs, said King. The subtle noises in the night had ceased and there was now no cause for hurry. It was almost possible to see as one could sense the pallor on his face as the man by the head of the bed reached out to push the door a little wider open and admit more starlight. Whatever his weapon was, he had to see clearly to use it. As his wrist reached out across the opening, a huge hand closed on it from outside. It was no use screaming, though the blood ran cold. The followers of Kali trained themselves to self-control. It was no use moving, because two repeating pistols, King's and Grimm's, covered him. He could not speak. Terror, the stronger for being suppressed, gripped him tighter than the unknown hand that held his wrist against the door frame like material in a vice. The door of the minaret below slammed suddenly, and one man was heard to enter. King felt the wheels of destiny turn once and drop the finished solution like a gift into his hand. Destiny had chosen the right man, and his assistants waited on him, saying nothing, offering no advice, not even glancing sidewise to observe him. It was apparent to the man by the head of the bed that they, all three, acted on instructions in accordance with a pre-arranged plan, that which is obvious being untrue 9 times out of 10. You are he whom we should watch for, King said slowly. There is talk of your sedition. That is why they sent you to Benares. That is why you were picked to sacrifice that true initiate of the Holy Nine. King paused and took another long chance. Had not the others acted in threes? You were ordered to Benares, where 2 others should join you. You, who cannot use the handkerchief, were to be decoy. We are they who should have met you in Benares. Yet you can no more tell which of us 3 are the 2 than you could escape from the task imposed on you. The man's jaw dropped. He believed himself taken in the toils of the relentless machine that owned him and 1,000 others. There is no more paralyzing fear than that. You would have cheated her, said King. He rose and made a sign to Grimm and Jeremy that was not easy to mistake. They lifted the unconscious prisoner off the bed and, taking more care of his bandaged leg than was quite in keeping with the circumstances, carried him down through the opening in the floor. From below came the sound of one short strangling cry. Clumsy, said King. He lacks practice. Then there was whispering and the sound of a dead weight being carried down wooden stairs. The door below slammed. There was the noise of men's feet outside, then of wheels. First Grimm returned, and then Jeremy. The expression on their faces was of great elation, suppressed and crowded to the point of near explosion. You will go to Benares. You will lead to the slaying him who was appointed for the sacrifice. You will be judged thereafter by the judges. Some gesture that King made must have been visible from the outer gallery, for the hand that held the wrist let go. The door was shut tight from without. In the ensuing darkness King descended, leaving Grimm and Jeremy to guard the new prisoner, and Chulandar Ghose, holding both sides in silent laughter that made tears stream down his cheeks, motioned him toward the ground floor. Chulandar Ghose remained where he was, wallowing in exquisite emotion. Narayan Singh, descending by broken masonry, groping for foothold, found his foot in King's hands and so reached terra firma. Sahib, it would seem the gods are with us. The doctor has a place where he can treat that patient better than in this tower. He and I brought a litter on wheels and men to push it. The Babu signaled me that there were doings upstairs, so I climbed by the broken masonry, knowing the value of surprise in an emergency. Shall the doctor amputate? Tell him no, said King, but keep him incommunicado. Chapter 11. Allah, do I live and see such sons? There was a cellar below the minaret, a mere enclosure in between foundations, but no less practicable as a dungeon on that account. Therein they cached the prisoner with Narayan Singh and 3 of Ali's sons on guard, instructed not to show themselves to the man they guarded but to be as rabid as wolves at bay toward all trespassers. Then, because a good rule is to hold your conferences where not even friends expect you, King Grim and Jeremy went and sat like great owls in the shadow of a wall above a low roof several hundred yards away. There they could see one another and not be seen. King met Grim's eyes. Grim met King's. The two spoke simultaneously. You were right. Pop Cyprian won't believe it though, laughed Jeremy, yawning. Sleep under the stars, you blighters. Here goes then. He curled himself up and was breathing like a kitten in a moment. There are 2 nines, King said with conviction. The real gang, and this Cali outfit. Grim agreed. Right, but as Jeremy says, Cyprian won't believe it. King faced toward Grim, and as if playing cards they tossed deductions to and fro, each checking each. One's good, the other's bad. The Cali outfit patterned their organization after the real nines, in the hope of stumbling on the secret. They've spotted a real initiate of the 9. Bet you, maybe one of the 9. Marked him down. Expect him in Benares. Told off this man in yellow to kill him. What for? Tibano. Ring in one of their own thugs to pose as the dead man. Probably. He might discover something before the remaining 8 get wise. But why pick a man who can't use the handkerchief, and whose loyalty must have been questionable? Probably he's the only one who can identify the proposed victim. If so, they'll watch him. Which means they'll have watched him tonight. Aha, they must have seen him enter the minaret. Good thing we left Narayan Singh on guard. You bet on those 3 sons of Ali's who were in trouble with the police. They'll fight like wolves. All nerves. Better than watchdogs. What next? Sleep, said Grim. And they did sleep there on the roof, where none but the stars and the crescent moon could see them, and only Chulinder Ghosh knew where to track them down. Chulinder Ghosh slept too, hands over stomach and chin on breast, with the broad of his back set flat against a wall and his whole weight on the trap door that provided access to the cellar, turban over one ear, so asleep that even minaret mice, hungrier than they who live in churches, nibbled the thick skin of his feet without awaking him. The North Sikandaram in particular can sleep too, when it has no guilty conscience, and it begins to measure guilt at about the deep degree, where squeamish folk leave off and lump the rest into one black category. Nonetheless, although the sons of Ali yawned when Narayan Singh posted them around the iron-railed gallery, with orders to keep one another awake and summon him at the first sign of an intruder, yawning was as much as it amounted to. They sat like vultures on a ledge and listened to the Sikh's enormous snores that boomed in the waist of the minaret. He calculated that the second floor, midway of either, was the key to the strategic situation. Nominally each of Ali's sons from where he sat could view a hemisphere, so that their vision actually overlapped. But in practice there was one whose outlook included a high, blank wall, over which it was humanly impossible for an enemy to approach because there were spikes along the wall, and broken glass, and beyond it were the women's quarters of a much-too-married Raja. So that one Habibullah was his name was more or less a freelance, able to reinforce the others or to spell them, without that extra loss of self-respect that might otherwise have attended desertion of a fixed post. Narayan Singh had said, sit here and here and here. Bertie had evidently meant divide the circle up between you. So Habibullah construed it, the other two confirming, but it was an hour before anything happened. Then, one beckons, said Ormuzid, he facing due east. There was a roof in that direction on which the light from a half-shuttered upper window fell like a sheet of gold leaf. One sits like a frog in a pool and beckons. Come and see. So Habibullah, having faced west long enough, changed his position and sat by Ormuzid. Ha, he beckons. Is his garment yellow, like that of him we slew in the jail, or does the light make it seem so? They watched with the infinite patience of hillmen and all hunting animals, until the third brother came around to lend 2 eyes of flint just one look and away again, back to his post. He beckons, he agreed. Does he beckon to us or? To us, said Habibullah. Moreover, he is clothed in yellow. The light shows it. He is one of those who loosed us from the jail. As if confirming Habibullah's words, the man on the roof in the pool of light raised up a Himalayan tulwar, shaped so exactly like the one that Ormuzid left in the police station that the two who saw it thrilled like women seeing a lost child. The northern knife is more than knife. What does he want with us, think you? Go and see. That drunken dog of a Sikh who snores within there will awake and never mind him. Climb down by the broken edges of the stone. We have done worse many a time in our hills. But caution is as strong as curiosity in the mind of Sikandaram. No Highlander who followed Bonnie Charlie to his ruin was as hard to pin down to a course or harder to turn from once on his way. Habibullah sat and weighed the pros and cons, including the likelihood that he in the pool of light might be a shaitan, until the other two cried shame on him. His reason in the end for going to investigate was fear that their loud arguing might wake Narayan Singh and that the Sikh might possibly claim all the credit for some discovery.